What makes a character fun to roleplay? For some, it has to do with a character's three-dimensional personality and exploring their motivations. For others, it starts with the lore that's provided in the character's species, class, and background. And for others, roleplaying is so uncomfortable that it's hard to have fun with. It's really common, actually, to get nervous being performative in front of friends, even though most people recognize that it's the RP in TTRPGs that make those games special. So, assuming that we don't feel very confident in our role-playing skills, how do we start growing them? Hi, I'm John. This is Dragon Mind, where we discover our best selves through gaming. And today, we're going to learn how to ease ourselves into role-playing so that we can have the most fun with it. Let's get into it. First things first, I want to start with a huge shout out to all of you who recently subscribed to the channel and left so many thoughtful comments in my other videos. I found that comments especially are key in the fight against the real final boss of YouTube, the algorithm. And it helps me gauge your interests, so whatever content I release is going to be most helpful. Today's topic is a great example of this. One of my commenters pointed out that most of my content so far has been strictly GM facing, and they wanted a more player facing topic. So if you have a topic request, please include it in the comments down below. And with that out of the way, let's dive into role playing. Today's viewer request reads as follows. I find that, as a player, I really struggle with coming up with a good character. I've tried to do the whole ask the DM about the story to make it fit their campaign, but they just tell me that they'll make the story around my character. And then, when I do get more info, I'm able to come up with a build, but still feel like the character is lacking. Also, not only do the other players have creative characters, but they're also way better at RP than me. I am interested in RP, but I can tell that my RP skills are way weaker than the other players. Plus, my character having a bad base leads me to feeling like I'm being punished for my lack of creativity/RP skills. Also, I noticed that I start getting focused on the rules/mechanics since it's the only part I do understand well. But then I get a bit rules lawyery and I don't ever want to be that player. Also, in RP heavy campaigns, RP is more important anyway. I did the whole amnesia thing, it wasn't full amnesia, which kinda helped, but I can't do that for every character. I haven't had much experience with actually playing D&D, so I know I just need the experience to get better and talk about it more with my DM, but I still feel stuck on the basic characterization backstory. First thing I want to say to you, commenter, is that you're not alone. Even the concept of role-playing can be this vaguely defined, nebulous thing that means something different table to table. One table's definition of RP heavy could just mean prioritizing story elements over mechanical elements, while another table may be much more interested in doing the voice, as Matt Colville would say. In addition, you did the right thing from my estimation by asking the DM about any story ideas they had going in. A lot of DMs, especially new DMs, sometimes have a specific kind of story that they want to play, and some character ideas are more appropriate than others. For example, if your DM wanted to run Curse of Strahd, it works best if the players are bought into the gothic horror themes in one way or another. And it can kind of feel like you're left adrift when your DM is like, come up with something and then I'll build something off of it, especially if you're not confident in building characters yourself. Again, we're not trying to make you feel like some master role player right out of the gate. Today's video is about figuring out some simple ways to get the ball rolling and helping you experience the fun of making character-based choices in-game. Over time, you can certainly learn to add performative elements to it, like acting out the physicality of your character's mannerisms, or again, doing the voice or an accent or something. But ultimately, I find that most players get stuck on the role-playing side of things when they don't have as many guidelines for their character's personality ahead of time. To get a solid base for your character's personality, I recommend starting with some simple traits. Is your character cheerful or brooding, protective, cynical, outgoing, reserved, impulsive, or strategic? In other words, one way to think of it is, once the session is done, what do you want the other players to remember about your character? The more clearly you can define it with simple descriptors, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to stay true to your character. For example, if your party goes to talk to a merchant, if your character is cheerful and talkative, you're going to be able to describe it differently than if your character is brooding and quiet. In addition, even if your DM doesn't really give you a lot of story details to build your character's personality off of, there are always the other players. Another way I like to think about it is in terms of party dynamics. If we think about it mechanically, the most interesting games I've been a part of are ones where each character fulfills different functions and roles. For example, if every character in the party is a barbarian, things are gonna get stale pretty quickly. It's a neat idea for something like a one-shot or a very short period of gameplay, but if you play a long, ongoing campaign, trust me, things get boring. So during session zeros, one of the things my table does is we just briefly mention what our character's general role is. If we want to keep the class a secret, that's fine, but it's still good to know, are they ranged or melee? Are they more of a damage dealer or a controller? This way we can make sure that everyone in the party has kind of a distinct function and has their time to shine. Otherwise, it's likely that one player in some moment is going to overshadow another. To get back to role-playing, the same is true of personalities. If every character is a brooding edgelord loner, the dynamics are going to get stale pretty quick. However, if one character is a brooding edgelord and another is a bubbly, cheerful optimist, and another is a war-weary veteran, well, those characters will start to be able to play off of each other, and you'll get cool story moments because of it. You'll start to see where characters may overlap or connect with each other. Do two characters share a common interest? Or maybe a friendly rivalry? Maybe they have an ideological conflict. Or maybe in one aspect or another, one character takes another under their wing. For example, let's say you have a shy, quiet character, but they want to be more outgoing. So the outgoing charisma caster kind of takes them under their wing and keeps an eye on them and supports them. Oftentimes, our characters have the best moments when they're sharing the spotlight with another character. Once you start role-playing your character according to some simple descriptive traits, you'll eventually start to set up some expectations to how your character will speak and behave. There is nothing wrong with playing a character that sticks to an archetype, but the longer you play the same character, the more and more bored you may get with making the same kind of decisions over and over again. When I read something like in the comment where the commenter described other players having creative characters, to me, it speaks to the three-dimensionality of their characters. The most satisfying definition for a three-dimensional character that I found with some brief research online is that a three-dimensional character is one that the audience, in this case you and your fellow players at the table, see all sides of. Whereas a one or a two-dimensional character, you only see one side. A one or two-dimensional character pretty much does what you expect them to do. If they're a villain, they do villainous things. If they're a hero, they do heroic things. A three-dimensional character, however, has moments and times where they may behave against the consistency you've established. This could be a moment where a villain shows genuine compassion, or a normally courageous, heroic character acts cowardly for some reason. These little inconsistencies are what make a character well-rounded and interesting to follow. Remember, we want to roleplay a character that's fun, And in the academic study of fun, another vaguely defined nebulous thing, a key aspect is some element of surprise. Every game has some sort of element of surprise. Even something like tic-tac-toe or chess, where both players seem to have equal resources, need some way to determine who goes first, which creates an ever so slight imbalance between the two sides. In the same way, you may be role-playing your character and a specific situation comes up that stirs an unexpected emotional response from them. They behave inconsistently with what you've established so far. And these are the story moments we remember most fondly. Now, unlike traits, I find that a character's emotions are far more transient and prone to change. When we're describing a character's traits, in a way we're describing their current fundamental nature. What is their usual demeanor and behavior we can expect? Emotions, on the other hand, tend to be responses to some kind of situation. While playing the story, you can ask yourself if a certain situation evokes an emotional response from your character. What makes them happy, angry, sad, disgusted, or afraid? You know, typical inside-out emotions. And three-dimensional characters don't experience one emotion all of the time. Let's look at one of my favorite examples, the classic anger boy, Zuko from Avatar. Yes, anger is an emotion that he expresses disproportionately more than the others, but he doesn't start angry all the time. Usually it's like bad news, like the Avatar has gotten away or something that evokes that response. And throughout the series, we also see other responses, like his immense sadness when he's not being struck by lightning, or the disgust he feels toward his father's behavior in Season 3. Although sometimes we can get stuck perceiving our characters as one thing, finding moments to showcase situations that evoke all 5 of these emotions from our characters lead to more memorable, satisfying role-playing. It also doesn't have to be Shakespearean dramatic. It could be little things like a little narrowing of the eyes or a slight tightening of the body. Those subtle indicators can sometimes reveal a lot about a character. And again, if you're starting with simple traits, you're giving both yourself and your fellow players room to discover your character in real time. And that discovery is part of the surprise that makes the whole thing so much fun. When some players start creating a character, they are compelled to create this incredibly detailed backstory, which explains the character's behaviors, demeanor, and motivations. Especially if you're new to role-playing, write a backstory if you're interested, but if that seems overwhelming, you can create an amazing character without one. In fact, in my current campaign, one of the most fleshed out characters at the moment started out without a backstory. As the player learned more about the character through play, she started writing backstory details in tandem to explain certain emotional responses she discovered throughout the course of gameplay. That being said, I'm an individual that thrives on structure, so for me, and for my players that I GM, in case they end up where our commenter ended up, where their GM isn't giving them enough, I usually ask them a series of backstory questions that help not only flesh out their character, but tie them into the events of the campaign. Some of them are more campaign specific than others. For example, for my latest campaign, one of the questions was, how did your character come upon our group patron? But here are some that are a little more generic so that you can use in a variety of different settings and campaigns. Number 1, where was your character born? Who are their family, and are any family members or relatives still alive? Number 2, growing up, what was your character's financial status? Did they grow up poor, rich, or middle class? Who helped shape their worldview? Was it a parent or family member, or maybe a mentor they met along the way? Or maybe was it a villain that entered their lives and left some kind of psychological wound? Number 4, what was the catalyst for your character to either start adventuring or join the party? Number 5, what's your character's current goal? Number 6, what does your character regret? Number 7, I stole from the YouTube channel Zipper on Disney because it's really good. What lie does your character tell themselves to make things easier? And number 8, how does your character see their story ending? Remember, your character's backstory is there in order to give context for their present behaviors. It doesn't dictate their future, and the events of the current story should change their trajectory in one way or another. Going back to inter-party dynamics, oftentimes the knowledge of a character's backstory and that context makes it easier for other characters to empathize with them, especially if your character has darker traits and is prone to frustrating behavior. One of the purposes of storytelling is to show a character's growth over time. If a character is completely unchanged by the events of a story, then chances are the story is going to be a little less meaningful. Once you're comfortable creating expectations through your character's simple traits, showing some inconsistencies and your character's emotional waves, and there's a little bit of backstory work that's been done, the next step, if you're ready for it, is to pay attention to how your character grows over time, or at least becomes more well-rounded and fleshed out. For example, an optimistic character may be naive to some of the world's darker realities. As they adventure and are confronted by some of those things, maybe they get a little jaded. That being said, just because a character's optimistic doesn't mean they're naive. A character like Uncle Iroh from Avatar tends to be optimistic, but it's earned wisdom and the result of a lot of self-work because of immense suffering. Again, little inconsistencies can make your character feel three-dimensional, but having your character act completely inconsistent can be jarring. Your character's traits, again, show who that character is most of the time. And those traits can change or shift. Just have them be little shifts session to session. A characterization philosophy I reflect on often comes from the creator of the American version of The Office, Greg Daniels, which I first heard about this on the Office Ladies podcast, which is episode to episode, a character's story should be moved about 5%, but enough that it feels like the story's events matter. And even if the GM sets up a campaign that you've bought into, as the player behind the character, the one making decisions for them, the onus is on you to demonstrate how the events of a story have changed your character. All right, we went over a whole lot today, so let's summarize how we ease into role-playing. First is by starting with some simple traits. Second is to add some three-dimensionality to our character by adding in some unexpected traits and showing our character's emotional responses to specific situations. Then we dive into a character's backstory and the reason they ended up in the place that they are, while also being mindful of how the story's events change the course of our character's future. So now I want to hear what all of you have to say. What was your journey into role-playing like? Did it come more naturally to you, or was it something you really had to work at? When you create a new character personality, where do you start? Let me know in the comments down below. Hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. And have an awesome day, everybody. Remember, your story matters. Bye-bye now.